This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
Hi, I'm Li Xueying, and you're listening to Letter from the Bureau. In this episode, ST's China correspondent Aw Cheng Wei looks at the rise of home bars in China and why they are helping the Chinese cope with loneliness. Good to have you on the show, Cheng Wei.
Thank you, Xueying.
Okay, so Cheng Wei, you wrote about this new trend in China, people making cocktails and hosting drinking sessions at home, but for a fee. So these are called home bars, as you wrote. Tell us a bit more. How do you come to know about this?
So actually, I started working on this after I wrote a story on why quarrels was the number one most searched for topic on Weibo during Chinese New Year. That story was about people choosing to stay in their cities where they work instead of going home. And I came across this interviewee who was running this home bar. That was when I realized that people in Shanghai, it seems, were converting their homes into bars where people can just come and chill and hang out. So I investigated more into the trend and realized that it was not just Shanghai, but it also spread to like Beijing, Zhengzhou, and Hangzhou. So that was how it started.
Wow, the research must have been hard work.
Yes, I worked very hard.
So how many bars do you go into for the purpose of this article?
So in Beijing, actually, I went to the one, but it's because Beijing has actually very few of these bars. And interestingly, it has to do with the buildings in Beijing. So because Beijing belongs to northern China, and this was where a lot of factories were built then. So a lot of the houses in inner city Beijing, I'm referring to like within the second, third ring roads, they actually were built in the 80s, and a lot of them have big rooms, but very small living rooms. So they are not amenable to actually people hosting, right?
Right.
It was also part of the time when I guess factory workers would not really stay in their living room at home, but actually be hanging out in public areas near their workplaces.
Right.
So the need for a living room was actually very low if you think about it. So that was why in Beijing there are actually very few of this within the more popular areas such as Sanlitun or within the second living road, basically.
Okay.
And even to the third or fourth. So it's only when the condos started building up, which is something that actually Shanghai, Hangzhou, these newer cities, they have big living rooms because they follow a more, what we have come to know as a more conventional structure layout of a living room. Then you could host people.
Right.
So that was the interesting thing, I guess, along the way I found about even the possibility of hosting people to come to their homes for a drink.
Right, unless the Beijing residents choose to convert an entire bedroom into a bar.
Yes, but then the rent here is expensive and their pay often doesn't commensurate. So most of them actually had to share. I think that what was also interesting to me along the finds in Beijing is that because a lot of people were sharing, I guess they had flatmates or they were living with people, sometimes strangers, there was a desire to actually go to people's homes as well, to hang out and chill. Much like, I guess, the closest thing I can think of is like, I guess in secondary school, people go to other people's homes to hang out instead of shopping centers, to just hang out with friends. It's a very nice and comfortable vibe. So there is a demand for it. And I think in Beijing previously, before this home bar was a thing, there was something else called home bar, which is commercial areas that were actually set up to look like villas.
Okay.
Yeah, so people would rent that as well. So we could also see this as a trend, a divergent trend from that.
Right.
Yeah.
I see.
There's a desire for comfort, I guess.
So you said you went to a bar in Beijing. What is the vibe like? How is it different from, regular commercial bars out there?
So the difference about this Beijing bar is also that the owner was focusing on mixology. So he wasn't hosting big groups per se, as what we see in Shanghai. But what he was doing, Mr. Ken Yang, he was trying to come up with special drinks to attract people. Because of the limited space in his living room, he could not seat more than, say, 3 or 4 people. So he will only take like bespoke bookings. When in Shanghai, for example, there was another vibe that was going on. So when I was interviewing the owner, I could see, because we were doing a video call, so he showed me, like his home bar in Shanghai, and it was very lively. I would really imagine it to be something like a house party. So people would just gather in small groups. Sometimes everyone would gather around the table to play a game, to play drinking games, to play board games, and the conversations would range from like star signs to MBTI. Basically, I think what the topics of young people, when they're trying to get to know someone, will talk about. Yeah.
So I'm going to get into the reasons why people want to go to these home bars in a minute. But before that, I'm curious to know, Why do the owners want to set up these home bars to begin with? Is it to make money? Is it because they want to do something else besides their regular day jobs, or what is it exactly?
So from the people I've spoken with, I don't think, in fact, they didn't set out to try and make money from this venture. I think they were frankly sick of their day jobs, and they were just trying to, I guess, make their life a bit more colorful and meaningful.
Right.
So they also wanted to meet people from different walks of life. It's so easy. One of the interviewees, Mr. Snowman Wang,
yes,
he actually described to me how, if you are working in, say, the tech industry, you hang out with only people in your industry, right? Because proximity and also, I guess, similar interests. So, for example, like he would describe his life before he opened the home bar as one that was full of perhaps competition, because there was also competition between colleagues. And other than that, it will be with like friends who are also in the industry. So it was very hard to, I guess, move out of that zone. So when he started the home bar, he just wanted to talk to people from different walks of life. So I guess anyone from like HR, even digital sales managers, so different people who could provide different life experiences, to have discussions with them and to find out like the world besides what he has known. So that was actually something that came up a fair bit in my conversations with people. There was also a creeping sense of loneliness that he felt among the city, and which I guess is something related to the first point, that, a lot of these cities, they are migrant cities. A lot of people move there for work. This venture is often alone unless they also started university in that city. Then subsequently, it can be a very lonely venture, especially when the people around you, you're still trying to figure out where you stand among them, who are your friends. I think these are a lot of questions that young Chinese ask themselves.
Right.
So the possible avenues open to them are not that many, because firstly, they also work very long hours, right? So their free time is actually not that much. There is that desire to also find people that they can hang out with. It's part of the darts culture that we have also come to know about. The darts culture is simply one that the young Chinese go out to meet people who have very similar interests, to complete a task together, but not necessarily become friends. So just hanging out.
Acquaintances.
Because there is a certain comfort, right? Like, this is someone who doesn't judge me and just want to, for example, have a one-for-one meal together, or go to the gym together, but then we don't have the entrenchment of like a relationship that the older generation is so familiar with.
Or the work that needs to be done to keep these relationships going.
Yes. And also like the stakes are very low, right? If you don't like me, it's fine, we can move on. But I think they also see the older generation in China, where guanxi is such a big thing.
Yes.
And all of this guanxi is so hard to maintain, so difficult to maintain, that actually they just want to take a step back from all of that and have something easy. Yeah, because a lot of times the older relationships, because a lot is proximity based, right? So a lot of shared interests, when I say shared interest, it's more like, the community's interest lah. But now everyone's individual interest, right? So basically, they don't want that anymore. They think it's 很累 to try and maintain, so tiring to try and maintain that kind of relationship.
And did this 大智 culture, is it something that was exacerbated as a result of the pandemic, or due to any other factors that you have observed?
So when I spoke with the interviewees about the 大智 culture, they said that the 大智 culture was born really out of the evolution of young Chinese relationships. I think often it's a reflection or a response to the older generation. So the COVID-19 pandemic didn't have that much, because a lot of them were used to online relationships. Because if COVID has something had to do with it, it will be an extension of the online relationship. But they actually want to go offline to meet like small groups of people. Well, I mean, one can say that like because the online relationships were not that satisfying, so there has to be some response to it. But I do think that there is it's more of the evolution of how they see the older generation.
Right. But why did this rejection of the older networks, how did that come into play? This rejection of the guanxi dynamic, why did that happen?
So I think the most perhaps prominent example would be Chinese New Year, right? Where they have to go and chuan all these 亲戚 whom they only see once a year but have to maintain guanxi, or even like the way that they have talked to their bosses. So I think because they do feel a bit of that guanxi in their everyday life now, how you talk to your superiors and how you talk to, say, people of your generation, you have to maintain a certain demeanor, you have to be respectful, for example. In China, the art of conversation or 说话之道 is so stark. You have to be you have to state your point but not appear too forceful, and sometimes the words have many layered meanings.
It's very hierarchical in that sense, right?
It is, right? So in that sense, it's a rejection of all of this. They just want a simple and 不要内耗, to not have that perhaps emotionally draining. You have to maintain this. You have to consider, what are the stakes here? What are this? What are that? They don't want that anymore.
And I'm sure that's had manifestations in many, many other ways in social trends and developments, whether it's about relationships or marriage or building families, right?
Yes. I mean, I think even the 婆媳之间, for example, the younger generation and their relationship with their, say, parents-in-law is also about that. Like, what is the single unit versus what is the community unit? If you don't want to have kids, is it a personal choice? Is it a family lineage thing? Because that is a quantity you have to maintain, right? If you think about it, I guess it's more also them prioritizing the kind of relationships they want to maintain. Because it's not possible to have that kind of relationship in the past where perhaps in your life you only meet 20, 30 people in the communist era. But now you have to meet hundreds and hundreds of people throughout the course of your life. It's not possible to have that kind of relationship simply to be so invested in each other's lives and as such. So there is that city living that I guess has permeated to this level.
And you're saying that basically the rise of the home bars is actually also a manifestation of this, right? It is a place where people feel safe, but it's also where they don't have to invest too much of themselves in these relationships that they make at these places.
Yes. So I think another indicator is the rise of the single economy, right? So a lot of people who are choosing to spend time alone or on themselves. Sometimes it's that having that choice to go out to people when you don't feel like being alone. So it's also part of that as well. So I think increasingly the major trend we're seeing here is that from the collective to the individual. That's how the young Chinese appear to be.
But why home bars? Why not have these touch and go relationships in just regular establishments out there? Whether it's other bars or clubs or game societies or hobby societies, etc.
I would see these home bars as a sort of an in-between. I think that there is the desire for deeper connection, which is the shared interest part. Because if you were to go to the other extreme where the commercial bars and the such, the kind of atmosphere, firstly, there's a very seen and be seen kind of like culture, especially I guess in Shanghai.
True.
Right? Where people want to go out, have a night on town, dress to the nines. But there's also people who don't want that. They just want a comfortable, stay-in weekend, but they don't want to perhaps be alone.
Right.
Perhaps they want to play board game with someone, share interests at a bar, have a few drinks, order food, right? Food delivery.
Yes.
Is so common. You know. I think there is some comfort to staying in, but also the desire to hang out with people. So we think of it as a mix, as opposed to the clubs and bars, as I'm sure you're familiar with at these places. The touch and go relationships may not be that appealing, or after a while can seem very empty. One of the people that I spoke with who attend these bars, she said that, Gina, she said that she used to be a regular at like the clubs, the bars, the commercial ones. But then she realized that at the end of the day, you feel so drained because you are either trying to maintain appearances, because it is also about putting on a public persona, right? Like you want to go and have fun, but it's actually very tiring for a lot of people.
Right.
And then they go home feeling very drained. But they feel that this is very enriching in that sense.
Okay, fascinating. And I'm sure you must be haunting some of these bars yourself.
Oh, actually, I'm not much of a nightlife person, but I do know a lot of friends who do hang out at bars. I think also because I'm based in Beijing, so we don't have that many options. Yeah, but I know that when I visit Shanghai or to visit a few friends, I will be hitting up my interviewees to also see for myself in real life, besides the video calls, what is it really like?
Well, thank you again for the hard work
that
you put into this story. Okay, thanks so much, Cheng Wei, for coming on to the show and for sharing with us this fascinating look into the psyche of the Chinese.
Thank you, Xueying.
Well, that's a wrap for Letter from the Bureau. If you would like to read Cheng Wei's column, we have a link in our podcast show notes. You will also find a link to other articles in our Letter from the Bureau series.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening.